So when I came back to Nairobi, I took a regional role, and my regional role is that I used to sit in Kenya, and I used to go to Uganda, Tanzania, Zambia, all the countries around the Stedman network, and I was their business development director. What did I do? I could brief a project because of my experience in research. I used to be used to recruit employees. If there was a problem with finances, I'd be the one to be sent to a particular country. I actually was very instrumental in setting up Nigeria, Zambia, and Mozambique. I remember when I was setting up Nigeria, we didn't have a bank account, and we had had a weird experience in Nigeria. We used to transfer money from Kenya to Nigeria through Western Union. Believe it or not, there's one transaction of about $10,000 that never got to the recipient. So when we were opening an office in Nigeria, I was actually given, I think about, let me not say the amount of money, I put in my briefcase, and I took a plane to Nigeria, and I was shaking, and I was going to pay, I paid the landlord in cash, I paid suppliers in cash, and that's how we set up, I bought furniture in cash, that's how we set up Nigeria. However, let me give you some examples of some of the crazy things that I did then. And this is, actually, when I used to look at my job then, I used to say, I'm actually the KYM. I'm not a business development director, but looking back, I realized how that experience has helped me now. I remember Ghana, our Ghana office, had a bad habit of not collecting enough money. Then at the end of the month, they'd call the Nairobi office and say, we don't have money for salaries, please wire some money. We wired money to them month 1, month 2, month 3, and we're like, honestly, how can we continue subsidizing an office? So I was put on a plane to Ghana, and the only thing I was given was accommodation for 10 days, per diem for 10 days. And my boss told me, do not come back until you've collected this amount of money. So I looked at my boss then, and I was like, this was no, let me not mention his name, my boss then. I looked at him, and I was like, okay, surely, is this my role? No. Anyway, I took the plane, and I went to Ghana. And in 4 days, we actually collected money to run the company for 3 months, in 4 days. I flew back to Nairobi, and on Monday morning, I was in the office, and he asked me, what the hell are you doing here? I was like, have you checked the bank accounts in Ghana? There's money. Done. I remember recruiting. I was then perceived to be the best person to recruit. I have recruited in Zambia, in Uganda, in Nigeria, and over time, I can actually tell whether somebody will make it or not. So there are instances when I remember we went to Tanzania. There was a country manager then who was male. There was another manager who was male. We traveled with him from Nairobi, and I to go and recruit. It was a very senior position. We saw over 40 people. And out of the 40 people we saw, I told my colleagues, I don't think there's anyone. But the 2 gentlemen had seen a very pretty girl. And they said, do you remember Jane? I said, which Jane? The light-skinned one, not with long hair. I was like, then they said, she did really well. Anyway, that's a joke. However, there are people who used to come to the company, they'd be interviewed by the directors and all that, and at some point they'd be told, why don't you, there's somebody who I'd like you to be interviewed by, and that was me, for a second round 2 check. And I remember this guy who had done very well in the interviews, and I was his last. He had seen the HR manager, the MD, all the directors, but I was his last person I was the person to interview him last. Let me tell you what this guy did. He came to the interview 10 minutes late. During the interview, his phone rang, he picked it up. Then when I asked him questions, he wasn't answering. I said, fine. So I recommended to my bosses, do not hire this guy. They said, no, but he did very well. They hired him. It was a disaster. So I'm the person who used to do the recruitment and so on. So what I did, I was the fixer. And at some point, people used to ask me, you're the business development director, but you're debt collecting, you're doing HR, you're doing A, B, and C. Why? And I said, you know what? It's because I was inspired by some books that I had read. There's a story of Jack Welch that says, if you want to get to the top, you must go through various roles within an organization so that you can be MD. That book, I read that book and it inspired me. The second book is a book by Robert Kiyosaki that says, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, work in corporate, do as many roles as possible. HR, sales, finance. And for me, what I wanted to do was ensure that I did as many roles as possible in the organizations. There's a book by Jim Collins, which I read much later, that talks, the book called From Good to Great. It talks about the best CEOs who were part of the good to great companies. 99% of them were people who had been within the business and had played several roles within the business, and that's how they became the best CEOs. So for me, when I was doing these things, I was not complaining because I knew, you know what, I was getting skills that would help me at some point. So how did I become managing director of Ipsos Innovate? In 2010, I had done everything that I needed to do at Sinovate, and I applied for a job. I got a very nice job with the United Nations program, and the amount of money that they were going to pay me was very good, and I actually projected that I would pay my loans in a short period of time. So I was going to leave Sinovate then. Then they advertised for the job internally. Quite a number of people applied, and where my office sits was next to the boardroom where the interviews were being done. So I could see people walking up the stairs, going in to be interviewed. I was like, okay, interesting. I was not really interested in this role. Then at some point, I was the last person to be interviewed. So I was called into the meeting room, and I thought they were just going to brief me. And they then told me that, they asked me, why haven't you applied for this role? And I said, I'm not interested in being managing director of Ipsos Innovate. Why? My reason was that I had been there for 11 years, and I was tired of working for the same company, and I needed a change. So the head of Sinovate for the region, which is Africa and Europe, told me, think about it. I'm giving you 2 weeks to think about it. If you can apply, the job is yours. If you don't apply, we'll have to go with candidate number 2. So I thought about it. I really thought about it because I really wanted to leave. Do you know my CV for the last 13 years shows one company? That thing used to bug me. And people would ask me, are you permanent and pensionable at Sinovate? Anyway, yes, I guess I'm still permanent and pensionable. So what I did is that I really thought about it for 2 weeks. It was the worst 2 weeks of my life. But when I started looking at my life, I realized that one of the things I do is avoid responsibility. If I'm given, I want to enjoy my life. I don't want to work really hard. I mean, school, I didn't work really hard, but I passed. But I don't want responsibility. And then I remember when I was a country manager in Uganda, when I was 29, I used to look at these people who report to me. Some of them were in their 30s and 40s, and they would come to me with their problems, and I would say, you know what, I'm too young to be carrying people's burdens. And I said I would never be managing director again in my life. So here's the job coming. 2 weeks, I'm thinking about it. So the first thing is that I started connecting the dots, and I was like, okay, you know what? I avoid responsibility, but responsibility follows me. Maybe it's time I just decided, let me take up the role. The other thing is that I did is that I prayed about it, and I reflected. So in my prayers, I told God, if this is a job I'm supposed to get, this is a salary that I want. So I had a very weird figure, 3311.005. And I wrote it on a piece of paper, and I said, if this is my job, when I'm given an offer letter with a salary, it will have to be this figure. Of course, I knew the probability of that happening was very low. Anyway, I also consulted with my family, especially my parents, and I asked them, what do you think I should do? One of the things that my family said is that whichever decision you make, we shall support you. However, one of the things that my father told me is that opportunities come once in a lifetime. And sometimes you look at opportunities and you don't take them, and when you become much older, you regret. And sometimes, because my dad was an A student, had a first-class honors, for him, he was always looking for opportunities. And he used to fight for them, yet he was an A student. For me, an opportunity has come. Have I really worked for it? Was I really desperate for it? No, but it's come. So he told me, take the opportunity. If you don't enjoy it, at least on your CV, you'll have an indication that you're managing director of Ipsos Innovate for 2 years. I thought about it. My influencers told me, take the job. Why? Because especially my friends are like, oh, I want a friend who's a managing director. Surely. What kind of advice was that? But anyway, finally, I went to the HR director and I told her, give me an offer. And if the offer looks good, I will take the job. When the offer letter came, it was exactly And I'm not joking. It was exactly the figure that I put on a piece of paper. Isn't that weird? Anyway, I became managing director, and then there's this thing people call me Madam MD. Why don't they call men Mr. MD? But people call me Madam MD. So that's me in my office. I think that was the first month on the job. So that's how I got to Ipsos Innovate. So the company I work for basically is in 84 countries globally. What happened was that we were Stedman. Stedman was acquired by Sinovate 100%. And then at some point, some global transactions happened. Ipsos bought Sinovate. Now we are Ipsos Innovate. We have been monitoring, meaning that we have a watchdog service on the media. We employ people to watch TV, listen to the radio, and they're looking out for adverts. Before a company pays a media house for adverts, they have to get a verification report from us. We also do market research. If you look at our business structure, our market research is about 53% of our turnover. Media research is 40% of our turnover. Opinion polling is about 3%. So those people who say that we have been paid millions, unfortunately, it's only 3% of our income. We can do without opinion polling. In fact, we collect the data, we sell the opinion poll data after collection. So you have a sales team trying to push the results to be sold. Now, who's buying research from us? Government is a big client, NGOs, private sector. Those are our core clients. And with the NGOs and the private sector, they're more looking for research to inform their strategy. A brand manager will tell you, my brand is not performing well, and therefore I need information that will help my brand grow, and we do research and we inform them. In my experience, I've seen companies that take research seriously, and there are companies that do not take research seriously, and therefore sometimes they buy research for the sake of buying research. However, some of the clients that I've seen using research really well and it has benefited their business is actually companies like Safaricom, Coca-Cola, and so on. So when a research report is given to a client, it depends on how they're able to apply the information or how they're serious about it. Some companies who are listed on the stock exchange actually have some indicators from research as a key metrics in the annual report. That's how seriously some companies take research. And those who do actually see results. So just an example, we do customer satisfaction surveys, new product testing. Some of the products that I can even see you drinking have been tested through research. Do you know there's a company that tests beverage? Let's say a company wants to launch a soft drink like, let's say juice. They will test the formulation so many times with us until they get it right. So they give us a product, we give it to respondents, they taste, and they're rating the sugar levels, the taste, and all that. They're so thorough in terms of getting consumer feedback because they want to ensure that the end product is fantastic. That's how seriously companies take research. We also do advertising research. Some adverts you see on TV have actually been tested, others have not. We do audience research, meaning that we check which media various companies are people listening to. So if you want to place an ad, do you place an ad on radio station A, B, or C? Ipsos has the data that will tell you which station is being listened to and the profile of people who are tuning to the station. Market feasibility studies, you want to set up a company, a school, we do those kind of studies. So what's my vision for the job? Now, when I took up this role, I was getting into, my predecessor had very big shoes, and I said, you know what, if I'm going to fit in those shoes, I really have to do something different. And I find this quote by Steve Jobs very interesting. Innovation is what distinguishes between a leader and a follower. And Ipsos right now where we are, we're the market leader. But it is a fact that our competitors are not asleep. And I say the only thing that will distinguish our brand as a market leader will be innovation. And even as we are trying to do service for our clients and all that, we're also trying to be innovative in terms of being at the lead. Let me give you some of our innovations. In as much as you know us for political opinion polling, last year we had a brainwave in the company and he said, you know what, every time we publish opinion polls, people bash us. Why don't you publish an opinion poll on social issue? So we did an opinion poll on annoying habits that men have and annoying habits that women have. And we got the men to talk about the women and the women to talk about the men. And we released that poll. And people were asking me, Maggie, you're a serious company. How can you be releasing such content? But let me tell you the impact of that release. That story, I think on the two biggest breakfast shows was discussed. I looked at the trends on Facebook, it was very high. That was day one. Day two, it was on the front page of a newspaper. And on day two, my phone was ringing off the hook. All the radio stations wanted us to go and talk about annoying male habits and female habits. Day three, it was actually on page 2 of the leading daily in Kenya, and I was invited to be on the breakfast show. But here's the thing, when we went on air, especially radio and TV, would ask the respondent to say, "Hii opinion poll yenyu ya annoying habits and so on, I believe. Lakini ile ya siasa, hapana."